Hey everybody, welcome to the Ground Effect podcast, where we dive into the heart of Formula One, bringing you the latest news, insider analysis, and sharing our thoughts on the motorsport we love. So come and join us, G and Mick, as we look forward to what promises to be an exciting 2025 Formula One season. G'day all. No race this weekend, unfortunately, so we thought we would delve a little bit into our fellow countrymen from Australia and New Zealand and delve into a little bit of history regarding Australian and New Zealand drivers throughout the Formula One World Championship. Alongside me is Mick. I'm going to call you Aussie Mick today since we're on point. How you going, mate?
G'day. Bit of a different show today.
Definitely. So currently, we've got 3 drivers from Down Under currently competing, and it's probably the first time we've had 3 or more since I would say the glory days of the 60s and 70s. I think more specifically in 1969, I believe it was Denny Hulme from New Zealand and Jack Brabham at the time from Australia, and I believe Bruce McLaren was also doing a little bit of racing then, although possibly not full-time. So it's quite an exciting period right now for Australians and New Zealanders with having some races to back, especially for New Zealanders because it was a long, lean period from having a full-time driver. So we'll start off with Oscar Piastri. Obviously, he's tracking really well this season and he's become one of the favourites for the World Championship, and he would be Australia's first world champion since Alan Jones in 1980, should he win the title. So it's a long wait for Aussie fans. Yeah,
he's looking good. Still a long way to go in the season though, but he's definitely put his hand up as a genuine title contender this year. It's good to see. I mean, we've had quite a few drivers who we thought might have come close. Fingers crossed he can get the job done this year.
Yeah, well, we thought Mark Webber had a shot 2010, I believe, when he was paired up with Red Bull, and it sort of all fell apart during the season, later on in the season, where he probably let go. I mean, he let go his best opportunity at winning a world title, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, 2010, that was probably going to be his year. Like you said, he had a couple of mishaps through the year, so he had to come in together with Sebastian Vettel in Turkey, and that really set the tone for their ongoing rivalry throughout the years. And then the massive crash in Valencia. I can't remember who was he following. Kovalainen, was it? And he clipped the wheel in Valencia and then flipped and ended up in the barriers. So Valencia, so European Grand Prix. And then basically the one that really probably undone the championship, he was leading the race in that Korean Grand Prix and it was pouring down rain and he's looped it, rolled back across the circuit and got hit by Nico Rosberg. And at that stage he was leading the championship and there was only 2 races left to go. So that sort of cost him that championship and Sebastian Vettel went on to win that one.
Yeah, and obviously went on to win 4 in a row. Tough for Mark Webber because it was definitely his best opportunity. He entered Formula One, I think it was in 2002, and with Minardi when I think it was Paul Stoddart, right? He was an Aussie fella that owned the team and gave Webber a shot.
Yeah.
And so that was really exciting for the Aussie fans because it was quite a long time since we had a Aussie driver on F1. I think the one before him was one of the Brabham boys. I think it was David Brabham in the early 90s who didn't really have a successful F1 career. I believe he went on and had a pretty successful sports car career. But yeah, it was exciting when Webber came along. But I mean, those first few years, he had a lot of bad luck. I remember, I think it was with Williams, it was just constant mechanical failures and DNFs, and then next thing you know, he got a shot in Red Bull and it was definitely a team on the up. And, you know, he went on to win nine races over his career with 42 podiums. So on paper, a successful career. But yeah, I'm sure he probably looks back at 2010 and feels that was the one that got away. And then after Mark, Daniel Ricciardo came through and he was the Aussies' next big hope. And I always believed that Daniel Ricciardo had a world championship in him.
Yeah, well, it certainly looked that way. He came in, I guess you could say he was the next young hotshot. He really put the pressure on Sebastian Vettel. Some people say that was the reason why Vettel left. You know, he had a pretty decent career, but then you look at his move to Renault, you could say that might have been the beginning of the end for him.
I always remember at the time, Cyril made a big deal about it to Christian Horner about, we got your guy. But unfortunately, it just didn't really pan out well. And then the move on to McLaren. where he actually got his last race win. Italy, wasn't it? Monza?
Yeah, Monza. For me, that was probably his best win in his career. But you look back at those Renault days, by the end of his time at Renault, he was getting that car on the podium. He was doing really well. And then he jumped ship to McLaren. McLaren were just struggling at the time. Yeah, then obviously moved to RB. And then broke his hand, which opened the door for Lawson. And you could say that was the end.
I thought he was going to come back. Really, the fairy tale ending would have been him sitting in that Red Bull seat for this season and challenging Max. But unfortunately, the script writers had different plans. And yeah, like you said, he had the accident at Zandvoort, broke his hand, and then that gave Liam Lawson the opportunity, which he took with both hands and did really well with in that short few races that he had. And then obviously that probably opened up the minds to Red Bull at the time that, well, maybe this young guy is where the future lays, and Ricciardo just didn't really quite recover or put in strong, consistent performances, unfortunately, and we all know sort of what has happened in recent memory. But successful career, 8 wins, 32 podiums, 3 poles. Best championship finish was 3rd in 2014 and 2016. A lot of things that didn't quite work out right for him, but hey, that's Formula One, right?
Realistically, he probably even really shouldn't have got another shot in the Red Bull family. I believe he was brought back purely as a marketing tool, which was a good move from Christian Horner. We know how popular he is, and I believe that was the reason he was brought back and then sold as the fairy tale, returning back to the big team. And from there, he just never really recovered. It was a bit of a shit way to go in Singapore. I think Red Bull did him dirty, but Red Bull do have a history of doing the dirty.
Yeah, pretty ruthless.
At least he finished with the fastest lap.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what he'll get up to in the future. We know he's a massive NASCAR fan. Perhaps he gives Bathurst a shot in the V8 supercars, and I hope we haven't seen the last of him, and that he does pop up at some point.
I know V8 supercars were talking about throwing a whole bunch of money at him to come and do a full season, which would be cool to see. Obviously, like most guys, they have a love with Bathurst because it has such a rich history in Australia. Wildcard teams come in. We've had a couple of IndyCar drivers. And, even Valtteri Bottas has talked about he'd love to have a crack at Bathurst. So,
well, Bottas, Australia's become his second home now, hasn't it?
Yep, the Finnish mullet.
Yeah, the Finnish mullet. But yeah, there's been a few supercar drivers that have had a crack at Formula One. We had Craig Lowndes, who was the prodigy at the time and went off to Europe in the mid-90s. And I think he had a crack at some of the junior formula over there. He even got a test for Williams, didn't he?
Yeah, in 1997. I think it was a one-off test in Silverstone, I believe. Like most Aussies, it comes down to finding the funding to continue and try and get yourself into Formula One. Especially around that time, you needed to have the funding. Sometimes you even needed to pay for your own drive. Australia has had quite a few drivers have a crack at F1. So you've had also James Courtney. He was the part of the testing program for Jaguar. And then he was unlucky too. He had that massive crash in Monza.
A lot of people forget about this one with James Courtney having a bit of a crack at Formula One. It's not that well known.
He hit the barriers apparently in a scary chicane. I read somewhere it was around like 67 G. So it's enough to give anyone a headache. But apparently it was rear suspension failure. Suffered injuries from that incident and then subsequently was sort of dropped after that.
But he went on to have a relatively successful V8 supercar career, right?
Yeah, became champion with Dick Johnson Racing, I believe it was, for Ford. I mean, he's still driving today, so he's been around a while.
Yeah, and some other drivers. I think Ryan Briscoe had a crack. I think he was that with Toyota in the early 2000s? I think he did some test driving or maybe even been a reserve driver.
Yeah, so it was, test driver for Toyota. Then you also had Will Power as well. He had a crack for Minardi in the early 2000s.
Yep.
So we've had a few have a go.
Yeah, and Will Power's still doing really well in IndyCar. One of the possibly top 5 most race wins in a career. Yeah, so he's up there anyway. I know he's won a few championships as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's been quite a lot, and I think like Courtney's the one that surprised me when I read about that. I think it was like a year or two ago. That completely surprised me. I had no idea that he was in a testing program there, and then I heard about the accident that basically wrote off his open wheel ambitions. But yeah, it was a bit of a lull period from, I would say, Alan Jones. I think he retired sort of mid-80s, obviously won his world championship. I think the first world championship with Williams, 1980. And it was just a big lull period there of no Australian drivers or New Zealand drivers. And so, yeah, I remember there was quite a bit of excitement about Craig Lowndes going to Europe because he was very highly regarded in Australian motorsport circles. And then obviously Webber finally got the full-time breakthrough. But yeah, there's quite a lot of history there. I mean, look, Jack Brabham, triple world champion. 3 world championships, 1959, 60 and 66.
Yep. And then started his own team.
Yeah, of course. Yep. And I believe Brabham was the highest race winner, I think with 14 wins for an Australian, followed by Mark Webber and with 9 and Daniel Ricciardo with 8. And, actually, I forgot the world champion, Alan Jones. How could I forget about Alan Jones? How many wins did Alan Jones get? 12 wins. Okay, so he's second on the list. So Jack Brabham, 14, Alan Jones, 12, Webber, 9, and Ricciardo, 8. You know, I always thought Ricciardo had more wins than Webber. That's quite interesting. So where do you think Oscar Piastri ends up on that list? I think he's going to the top.
Well, yeah, if he keeps tracking the way he's tracking, he's definitely going to be Australia's most decorated Formula One driver, I reckon.
Yeah, a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I mean, we seem to forget this is only his 3rd season. You know, you look at someone like Daniel Ricciardo, he had 14 seasons. Mark Webber, he had 12. And, you know, Oscar's already on 5 wins from 3 seasons. He's only had 51 starts, and 14 podiums, so he's well on his way.
Yeah, and obviously back-to-back F2, F3 champion as well. Pedigree's there. Oh, God, Alpine must be just kicking themselves.
Yeah, I mean, what a smart move, man, from Webber. Because you would imagine Webber would have had a lot to do with it, a lot to do with that move to McLaren.
Yeah, well, we mentioned in the last podcast just how important, we think it's such a great move to have Mark Webber as your manager. Just all that experience.
You look at the circumstances now with all the talk of the inter-team battle with Lando Norris. Think back to Webber's time at Red Bull and that inter-team battle he had with Seb Vettel.
I'm going to say it, multi-21.
Yeah, right? Multi-21. So he would be the perfect person to have in your corner when it comes to an inter-team battle with your teammate. I think Webber has to take a lot of credit, especially the way Oscar is. When you look at Oscar, you can see a lot of Mark Webber, because if you look, even after the multi-21 incident and the post-race interview, how calm Webber was. You know, that really, the only time I ever saw Webber get really pissed off was when they swapped. So Webber was running the latest front wing. I can't remember what circuit was that though, but he was running the latest front wing. And then before the race, they took that wing off and put it on Vettel's car.
That's right. For some reason, I thought it was China, but I mean, I could be completely wrong here.
And then the post-race interview, Sebastian was talking. Mark was sipping a drink of water. And he literally just slammed the glass down and water went everywhere. But he's very Piastri-like, right? He's very calm. He's very level-headed regardless of the situation. Yeah. And I think that is rubbing off on Oscar. And I think it's having an effect on Lando Norris as well. Like even Max has come out and said it. He's very, very calm, gets the job done when he needs to. It's not the loudest ones you need to worry about. It's always the quiet, calm ones.
Well, it's kind of like exactly right. Falls off the horse, he'll just get back straight on it and not complain about it. Whereas, you know, we're seeing Lando making mistakes and then sort of the self-depreciation and just, everything around it. So, Oscar, I think championship mentality. So I think those 3 wins that we see currently, we'll give it a year or 2. I think he will be maybe number 1 on the Australian list of Formula One wins.
Well, I mean, look how good he is now, right? So imagine if he stays in a top-tier team, what he's going to be like in the next 3 to 5 years.
Exactly.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah, he's got a huge ceiling. Now, let's not forget Jack Doohan. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on him, and we still feel that the deal is done and dusted with Colapinto. Yes, there was some positive news for him that came out last week about having a guaranteed race seat until the European leg, which there's only one more race. So we've got Miami and then we're off to Imola. What's the latest news regarding Colapinto? He's going to be FP1 at Miami.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's FP1, but he's definitely going to be in Miami as a reserve/test driver.
Okay.
So, instantly the talk is going to ramp up again, and then following that, there's rumours already coming out that apparently Doohan's his contract was only for 6 races.
Right?
I mean, it's unfortunate. I kind of do feel sorry for him because it's, similar to Lawson, man. They've just come in under massive pressure. You can't afford to make a mistake. And then you see what happens when you make a mistake. It's like under that constant scrutiny.
Yeah.
People want your head. And in Formula One, there's nowhere to hide.
Exactly right. Now, Doohan, I mean, he'll have some experience in his corner. Obviously, for those that don't know, his father was a world champion in 500cc motorcycles. So hopefully Jack has, he's got some good experience to lean on there. But we've talked about it before. I think he's been tracking pretty well. Like, I mean, disaster from Melbourne, and then there's been moments where he's been, on par or close enough to Gasly as a rookie, which I think is pretty impressive. Last week, he just got munted with just a useless strategy call, really.
Yeah.
That's, nothing you could really do about that. I would, personally, I think he should get the full season to prove himself because I think he's doing enough. But look, we all believe, and I think most of the F1 community believes that Colapinto is going to be in that seat at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you would imagine if Colapinto gets the seat, he'll get demoted back to the reserve driver, and then I would imagine from there he'll be looking for an out, looking to join another team. And I mean, there would be plenty of teams that would pick him up, even, as a sim test driver, reserve driver. He definitely deserves to be in and around the paddock. He's shown he's got the pedigree.
But let's see, like Colapinto, I think a lot of people are forgetting that, he started off hot with Williams, and then he made quite a few mistakes in the end there, so...
Yeah, it became a human wrecking ball.
Yeah, so...
At the end. He crashed, last 5 races of that season?
Yeah, there was quite a lot, keeping those mechanics at Williams very busy. Yeah, look, it's not a sure thing that Colapinto is deserving, or at least, has a long career ahead of him in Formula 1. I mean, he could come into Alpine and...
Well, yeah, exactly. Who's to say he's going to be any better than Doohan?
Exactly.
Yes, he did all right in the test.
Yep.
We saw what happened to Lawson. Who's to say
exactly
Colapinto's going to come in and just brain it?
Yeah. Maybe he's not on the pace, or maybe Colapinto is a guy that sort of, takes higher risks and therefore maybe has more accidents. Let's see how it pans out. But I don't think it's all over for Jack, even if Colapinto does come in, because you've got the team leader in Flavio Briatore. He's ruthless. So even if Colapinto comes in, doesn't perform, and let's say 5, 6, 7 races and few DNFs, few accidents or whatever, then don't discount Flavio from wielding the axe and bringing Jack straight back in.
Yeah, or they've got that, what's that young...
Aaron? Is that
Aaron, the young fella that did the FP1 in Jeddah?
I mean, that's...
So they've got massive raps on him as well. So they were even saying that Colapinto's not even really a sure thing because of the raps they have on this. What's his first name? Paul?
Is it Paul?
Paul? Tall Paul.
Tall Paul.
So we're just going off rumours, man. Formula One speculation.
The circus.
We could be completely wrong, and Doohan goes on to stay with Alpine for the next 10 years. We just don't know,
see
right?
What happens. Now, moving on to Kiwiland.
The other side of the ditch. Cheer, bro.
Cheer. Nick Minute. Liam Lawson. Okay, we know a lot about Liam coming in 2023, broken hand of Ricciardo, gets his shot. To be honest, Ricciardo never breaks his hand. Maybe Liam never gets his opportunity. I thought he would have gotten... I thought he was a good chance to get the seat in a full-time capacity for 2024, not to be, and then replaces Ricciardo after Singapore. And look, he's done a pretty good job coming in without having a full season behind him. We don't really need to delve deep into the Red Bull dilemma, debacle, whatever you want to call it. Yes, he didn't perform, but was only given 2 races. And now he's tracking. I think he's building. The last 3 races, I feel like there's performance that's coming. He's much more on par with Hadjar, from last week anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Helmet's come out and sort of said the same sort of thing, progressing quite well. Still a tiny bit of work to do to get on par with Hadjar, but again, that'll take time, a few more races. But I mean, we discussed it when there was talk of him going to Red Bull. We were like, no.
Yeah.
Give him a full season in the RB, let him build into his career, and then put him in the seat.
Yep.
Right? We knew this is exactly what was going to happen.
Obviously, the Kiwi in me wanted him in RB because I haven't seen in my lifetime a New Zealander on the podium at a Formula 1 race. So I thought, well, this is going to be the best opportunity, best chance with Red Bull. But
the
brain...
what was going to happen.
The logical thinking was like, I want him to stay in the RB team and just get that full season behind him.
Like I said, we were discussing this before he even got announced, and we were just like, nah. Yes, we want him in the big team because we want the Kiwi driver running up the front. But we also knew how ruthless the big team are, and kind of felt like, nah, just give him time to find his feet. You could have put Yuki in that seat, give Yuki half the season, then he fails, then put Liam in the car. At least then he would have had a bit of time to sort of build up his confidence too, really.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing, right? Yes, he had the confidence when he got his shot and then took over from Ricciardo and he was doing a good job. But from there, he should have stayed in that team and built on that, which I think he would have done. If that was the case, he'd be smashing Hadjar now. Easy in my mind. He'd be smashing Hadjar now. But instead, he got dropped into RB and we won't go into it, but it was shit.
Well, I think he's bounced back relatively well. I've just sort of seen the incremental performance increases in relation to Hadjar over the last 3 races. It's still a pressure cooker there. They've got Arvind Lindblad, I always get his last name wrong, which is the Red Bull prodigy, 17-year-old. He just had his first race win in FP2 over the weekend. So the drums are beating for him. But again, is Yuki safe at Red Bull? Is Max even sticking around at Red Bull? Let's just see how time plays out. We could go way too in-depth about this, and I'm sure we will as the season progresses. But we'll keep it onto the theme of New Zealand drivers. New Zealand had, again, we've touched on this, golden age in the 60s and 70s, most notably Bruce McLaren, who was the founder, obviously, of McLaren as we know today. So there's always been, from a New Zealand motorsport fan, there's always been a soft spot for McLaren over the years. And we had a world champion with Denny Hulme, who was world champion in, let me get this right, it was 1967, I think it was.
Yep.
1967. And at the time, there was also Chris Amon, who was considered one of the best drivers not to win a race, but had multiple podiums. And so that was Chris Amon. Drove a little bit for Ferrari there too. A few drivers in the 70s, which just had, just a few starts. Although Howden Ganley did have 41. We didn't really have much going on. And then Mike Thackwell came in the 1980s, and there was some big hoopla around him because at the time he was the youngest driver to start a Formula One race at 19 years of age. So I think there was a lot of sort of, this guy could have a big future, but unfortunately that never transpired. He only had 5 race weekends and only 2 starts. And then it was a long, lonely wait. And as a Kiwi motorsport fan, we really thought Scott Dixon was going to get a crack in the early 2000s. And we all know about him. He has a stellar IndyCar career.
Well, he's one of the all-time greats now in IndyCar.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a few juniors that have sort of come up the ranks. And Brendan Hartley was one who did a lot of junior Formula driving with Danny Ricciardo, both in the Red Bull junior program. And so at the time I thought, he's going to be the shot. And I thought that opportunity came and left.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his one and only sort of year in Formula One, he was super unlucky. Was it 2018 was his full year?
Yeah, so 2017 he came in to replace the Torpedo.
Oh, yeah. The Torpedo.
It was Kvyat, right?
Yeah, it was Kvyat. I'm sure. Yeah, it was Kvyat.
He came in to replace. Sort of at the time, for me personally, I always thought it was a bit of a stopgap because there wasn't really anyone in the Red Bull junior program that was old enough or that was ready for promotion. And it was almost like, here's a guy that's doing pretty good at sports cars, used to be on our books, we know him pretty well. And I think at the time he was still doing a lot of work for, or maybe a few years before, Mercedes. He was a test driver for Mercedes, or the sim driver.
Yeah.
So he was still around the Formula One circle. And then, he got his shot in 2017 and did okay. And then 2018, you reckon a bit of bad luck?
Yeah, man, he was munted. So he had the 2018 season, he had 7 retirements. He had 8 engine replacements. Most of those meant he started from the back of the grid. Because, remember this when they had the engine change and it was like you got a 10 grid place penalty?
Penalties, etc., yeah.
When the penalties were just ridiculous. So, I think that's super unlucky for him, man. And you look at him now and he's killing it in the WEC. He's won 4 championships.
Yeah, multiple Le Mans winner.
What, he won 2 with Porsche and he's won 2 with Toyota?
Yeah,
and he's in the hunt again this year. Formula One wise, he kind of just, for me, it was just bad luck. And that was the time also too, Honda were doing their power unit development. So it was just a constant shit fight. Yeah, I think he suffered big time with that, and that's kind of probably what hurt him the most and unfortunately made him retire from F1.
Yeah, I think also there was... See, at the time, 2018, his teammate was Pierre Gasly, who was quite new. And obviously, Red Bull had pretty big reps on him at the time. And I remember sort of halfway through the season, From a points perspective, obviously Gasly was pulling ahead and Marco sort of came out and was like, well, we're going to give him to the end of the year, or so many races to the end of the year, and he needs to close the gap on performance towards his teammate Gasly. But obviously not good enough, and Red Bull cut him at the end of the 2018 season. And I think that's when... Was Gasly promoted to Red Bull for 2019? The whole Red Bull saga to me just completely... I think Brendan Hartley was then replaced by Albon at the time. And
yes, it would have been because Albon was before Gasly.
Yeah. And Albon and Gasly were then, I think, teammates for that season. And I think that's when... So it was Max and...
So Danny left when Max came in. Then Albon came in. Did Albon even see out the whole season?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. Because, mate, Red Bull is just completely...
Yeah, well, I mean, there you go. You look at the history. Look at the history, you know?
Yeah.
And you see, like, Seb was the great white hope, basically killed Webber, you could say. I mean, Webber did it on his own in 2010, you know. Red Bull have always had the young hot shot. Ricciardo was the hot shot, kind of forced Vettel out. Verstappen came in.
He's the hot shot.
He's the hot shot.
Still the hot shot.
Still the hot shot, yeah, exactly. Forced. You could say forced. You know, at the end of the day, it's the driver's decision. But you would say what caused Ricciardo to leave. No one's been able to keep up with Max ever since. But, you know, the history's there that shows you it's a friggin' circus. The merry-go-round that is Red Bull.
But from a New Zealand perspective, there were a few other drivers around at the time that were young and potentially had, I guess, an outside chance. Mitch Evans was one. Relatively good GP2 career. Now he plies his trade in Formula E.
He's managed by Webber as well, right?
I don't know if he still is managed, but at the time when he was in GP2, Webber had a lot to do with him.
Yeah.
And Marcus Armstrong was the other one. Marcus Armstrong was under Ferrari's books for a while. I think he did get a test with Ferrari back in 2021, but has now moved on to IndyCars. It was actually Marcus Armstrong that Angela Cullen was doing a little bit of work for before Lewis Hamilton pulled her back into the fold.
Yeah, I mean, for such small... Well, I mean, your island's smaller than mine, but... but you know what I mean? For such a small population, you know, and then you look at Formula One, out of the 75 seasons, we've had an Australian or New Zealand driver in 63 of those seasons. So when it comes to motorsport, we've actually got some pretty decent pedigree there.
Yeah, there's some great talent that comes through, and the challenge has always been just a funding issue. Well, there we have it, a little bit of history regarding Australia and New Zealand and Formula One. We couldn't go through, obviously, every single driver. There are more to talk about, and I'm sure there's more with more deeper stories than we actually know about.
We'll be back again next week with a Miami preview, and another week on, I'm sure the rumour mill will be flying. So until then, we'll catch you in the next one.
Catch ya.